Thank you very much for taking the time as well. We now move on, but stay in Washington, of course, and Syria's President Ahmed Al-Sharaa has arrived in the United States for a historic official visit, a day after being removed from Washington's terrorism blacklist. Sharaa, who led rebel forces to oust Bashar al-Assad late last year, is scheduled to meet US President Donald Trump at the White House on Monday. This is the first visit by a Syrian president since the country's independence in 1946. Sharaa, once affiliated with Al-Qaeda, has transformed into a moderate leader since Assad's departure. The US also plans a military base near Damascus to support humanitarian aid efforts. Sharaa is also expected to seek funds for Syria's reconstruction, which is estimated to cost around $216 billion. Now, to discuss this, we're joined by David K. Johnson. He's an American author, and he joins us live from New York. Thank you very much, David, for joining us here on the program. Of course, this is a huge visit. The first visit by a Syrian leader in decades, since 1946. What message does this send? And what do you think Donald Trump thinks of the new Syrian leader?
Well, you know, yesterday's terrorist is tomorrow's hero, if you're successful. And that's part of what went on here. But it brought down the Assad regime that for 2 generations had oppressed the people of Syria. Trump will, when it's convenient, praise President Sharaa, but he will denounce him when it's convenient and call him an idiot, as he does all sorts of people. But the U.S. has significant interests here now in Syria, and so this meeting makes sense. Syria continues to be unhappy, to put it mildly, that the Golan Heights, which was part of Syria until 58 years ago, is still occupied by Israel. Trump, on the other hand, wants to minimize conflict with Israel from other countries. Trump will also be concerned, one hopes, about the degree to which Russians may get access to Syrian ports.
Yeah, and of course, David, you brought it up yourself, the issue of Syria possibly forming diplomatic ties with Israel and the possibility of Syria joining the Abraham Accords. How likely do you think that is?
Not very. And the Syrian side has said, you know, we're in a different situation than the others who signed the Abraham Accords 6 years ago or 5 years ago because of the Golan Heights and the occupation by Israel for the last 58 years, since 1967. So I don't think on that area you're going to see progress. It'll also be interesting to see if Trump agrees to any kind of support for rebuilding, because he's argued the U.S. government cannot afford to provide subsidies for health care and food to the poorest people in America. So this would be an interesting development if he decides that, yes, we can afford to help Syria with its more than $200 billion cost to rebuild after the civil war.
And of course, David, Sharaa was once affiliated with Al-Qaeda, and then he was taken off the US's terrorism list just yesterday. Your thoughts on that man coming to the White House and what people around Trump might be thinking about that?
Well, I'm not surprised by this at all. Let's remember that Donald Trump was going to meet with the Taliban at off the White House site. And he has no knowledge of geopolitical affairs. I mean, remember, this is a man who knowledge of history and politics in the world is non-existent. He thinks countries that are hundreds of miles apart are at war on their borders. So that part doesn't surprise me in the least. Donald is a very transactional person. For the whole 37 years that I've known and written about him, everything is a transaction. There's no long-term strategy. There are just short-term tactics.
Yeah, and David, of course, when Donald Trump announced that he was going to be lifting these sanctions on Syria, he was on his first foreign visit, his tour of these Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and so on, which is when Donald Trump said he was going to give Syria a quote-unquote chance at greatness. What do you think that might imply Of course, Donald Trump, as you've said, is a very transactional president. What more does it have to do with that Gulf visit?
Well, greatness to Donald means that you're doing whatever he tells you to do. I mean, that's just absolutely fundamental. In his own mind, Donald sees himself as the only really important, competent, and qualified leader in the world. And ridiculous as that may be, that's how he thinks, and he said this quite clearly. So we don't know what's going on with Trump's relationship with the Gulf countries, which have been putting a lot of money into his family's pockets. But you can be sure there's something they want out of these meetings, and that the Syrians will have to decide how to cope with that to get what they want, which is primarily going to be recognition. They've got that, and now aid to help rebuild their country after the Civil War.
Yes, indeed. And of course, what can we expect from Donald Trump and his engagement with Al-Sharaa? We know previously that he's called him a very attractive man. Your thoughts on how these two and their leadership and their characters will develop when they become face-to-face in that Oval Office in front of those press cameras?
Well, I expect that you will see Donald Trump get along just fine with the president of Syria in the Oval Office. You're not going to see a Zelensky ambush, as we saw some months ago, to denigrate him. But you should also expect that Trump is going to, in various ways, indicate, that I'm the one in control here. I'm the one in power. And we'll have to watch and see how the Syrians react to that and how they navigate doing that. The essential element in dealing with Donald is you have to somehow indicate that you recognize he's the top dog if you want to get anything from him. And for many people, that's meant humiliating themselves. We've seen some people stand up to Trump, and we've seen that generally that doesn't go well. If not in the moment, then after the meeting.
Yes, David K. Johnson, thank you very much for joining us on that issue. Here on NewsX World, we will of course be covering all of Al-Sharaa's visit to Washington. Speaking of, we have further updates in regards to that situation where Syrian President Ahmed Al-Sharaa was seen playing basketball with US military officers ahead of this historic meeting with President Donald Trump at the White House. The first visit by a Syrian head of state. Viewers, on your screens, we show the footage here shared by the Syrian Foreign Minister Asad al-Shiabani, showing Sharaa playing basketball with Admiral Brad Cooper and Brigadier General Kevin Lambert at an undisclosed location. The friendly encounter comes as a surprise given Sharaa's controversial past. He is, of course, a former Al-Qaeda leader who once had $10 million US bounty on his head. Trump has sought to rebuild ties with Damascus, lifting most sanctions on Syria in June, and previously meeting Sharaa during his trip to Saudi Arabia last May. Now we have further news, but this time we go down south, and a speeding driver fleeing police has crashed into a crowded bar in Tampa, Florida's historic Ybor City district early on Saturday, killing 4 people and injuring 11. The car had been seen street racing before officers attempted a pit maneuver to stop it, but it failed. The driver is a 22-year-old and his name is Silas Sampson. He lost control and struck a group outside the bar. 3 victims died at the scene and a 4th later passed away at hospital. Sampson has been charged with 4 counts of vehicular homicide and 4 counts of aggravated fleeing. He is being held at Hillsborough County Jail. Now, Pope Leo XIV has offered prayers for the people of the Philippines as the country faces devastation of Super Typhoon Fang. The Pope expressed his closeness to those affected by the violent storm, which has forced evacuation of more than 1 million people. Let's listen in to what he said.
Cari fratelli e sorelle, sono vicino alle popolazioni delle Filippine colpite da un violento tifone. Prego per i defunti e i loro familiari, per i feriti e gli sfollati.
Now, according to the Philippine Weather Service, Super Typhoon Fengwang made landfall in Aurora Province on the island of Luzon, with sustained winds of up to 185 kilometers per hour and gusts reaching up to 230. The storm, spanning nearly the entire county, has already killed at least 2 people and caused widespread power outages across the Bicol region. Authorities have placed large parts of Luzon under the highest storm warning levels, while Manila remains under level 3. Officials continue to urge residents to stay in evacuation centres as heavy rains and powerful winds batter the region.